New York's gay and lesbian community celebrated that state's same-sex marriage victory over the weekend. And many hope that this victory will revive efforts in other states around the country. However, there are many states that have this that remain hurdles to overcome. Political battle lines being drawn with Republicans increasingly split on this issue. Same-sex marriage may turn into a key wedge issue for the 2012 election. Richard Socarides was an advisor to President Clinton on gay rights issues, and he's now president of the group Equality Matters and joins us. Richard, it's great to see you today. New York becoming the sixth state to legalize same-sex marriage, but they are still in a significant minority in this country because there's 29 states having constitutional bans on the books. 12 others have laws specifically prohibiting gay marriage. Is this really the strong enough movement needed right now to overturn any of the bans in other states, those 41 states that I mentioned?
Well, you know, we're tremendously energized and motivated by the success we had with a bipartisan coalition of the state legislature working with Andrew Cuomo, who showed tremendous, very capable political leadership. So we're very energized by what happened in New York on Friday and the celebration you referred to over the weekend, where Governor Cuomo marched in the Gay Pride Parade. People were thanking him, and people, you know, on the side of the parade crying in tears because they see, you know, what is possible. We've been energized by what's possible. But you ask, you know, a terrific question about what is possible state by state. You know, with the addition of New York, there are people live in 10% of the U.S. population live in places where you can be married. We hope we get California back later this year by court decision. That'll be up to 20%, and we think we'll have significant momentum.
Richard, when we talk about the greatest chances of success in other states, mention which ones you're going to be focusing your efforts on right now, as we all know what's taking place in California with Proposition 8. That still looms in the balance, but bring us up to speed on other states that are entering the fray.
Well, Maryland, we are very hopeful. We came very close in Maryland last year. I think that effort will be revived. Rhode Island is also a state that we are very much focused on and very optimistic about. We hope to be able to go back to Maine and Oregon. But ultimately, we are looking for a U.S. Supreme Court decision. I mean, the right to marry is a federal constitutional right. It ought not to depend upon what state any individual lives in. So while this state-by-state progress is important because it shows people that this is a mainstream issue, that when you expand the right to marry, there is no downside. You know, the gays are not going to use up all the marriage licenses in any of these states. We just want what other Americans have. But ultimately, we will need to look for a U.S. Supreme Court decision which recognizes the federal right to marry so that everybody can be married everywhere. And we look also to President Obama now to show leadership on this issue. He's done a lot of terrific things on gay rights in the period he's already been president. There is a lot more he needs to do in this term, and he needs to stop evolving. He needs to finish his evolution, as you know he's referred to. He's in an evolutionary position on same-sex marriage, where he needs to finish his evolution and get on with it. I mean, we are tired of what looks to many as a cynical political calculation. We want him to lead on this and not be a politician.
Richard, let's go over what we see as the tide of national opinion on this, because it seems to be turning. There's a Gallup poll in May that was taken. It found 53% of Americans were in favor of same-sex marriage. Last week, as you bring up, President Obama again stopped short of fully supporting it, although he came into New York City with his hands open from the LGBT community, asking for money for his re-election. Is the president in jeopardy of losing the support of the LGBT community if he doesn't come out and utter the words that he believes in marriage equality?
Well, listen, I think gays and lesbians support President Obama. They think his heart is in the right place. I think compared to the alternatives, he looks particularly appealing. But we saw in New York what's possible with Andrew Cuomo. I mean, he took, you know, he did this during tough economic times. He did this with Republicans. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He showed the kind of leadership, you know, that perhaps President Johnson was so famous for with Congress. I mean, it's funny, I talked talked last night to a very well-connected Washington lobbyist who's very close to the White House and who is very close to members of Congress, who said to me, you know, what Cuomo was able to achieve in New York made President Obama look small, and he needs, you know, our president is a constitutional law scholar and a civil rights leader, and while he has done many things, and we will vote for, most gays and lesbians will be voting for him, we want to be enthusiastic about him. We want to support him with enthusiasm, and we don't want there to be an enthusiasm gap. So we're hoping that between now and the next short bit of time, he completes his evolution and he announces that he is, in fact, once again, supports everyone's right to marry in this country.
Richard, it's really important to point out that what happened in New York happened with a Republican-led legislature. Do you think that this is going to become a bigger wedge issue as we approach 2012, especially as we bring up the national polling? It seems like our politicians need to catch up with what America thinks.
Well, I think that's exactly right. That's an excellent, excellent point. I mean, the country, culturally, is much further along than our politicians. I mean, I actually don't think it'll be a wedge issue. You know, it may get some attention in some of these Republican primaries when you're competing for right-wing votes. But I think in the general election, people, you know, most people in this country are saying, you know, are now saying, like, you know, what's the big fuss over? I mean, let's get on with it. People just, you know, nothing bad is going to happen to anybody if you expand this right. As I said, you know, the gays are not going to use up all the marriage licenses. But so I think that it is becoming increasingly bipartisan. What we saw in New York is Republican state senators crossing over to support this. What we really saw was that when people of good conscience can work with each other, can reason with each other, can talk it out. You know, Governor Cuomo let everybody take as much time as they needed to get to this point. That we can come to some kind of national consensus on this. So I think that's very important.
It's amazing what can get done. Richard Socarides with Equality Matters. Richard, great to see you this morning. Thanks.
Thanks, Thomas.